Hello everyone and welcome to another video with me, 320 Sim Pilot. Today we're taking a look at another challenging approach, this time into Nice. This is a really beautiful place to fly into and it's a lot of fun. I've been asked about it quite a lot on the channel over the last couple of years and somehow we've not really got around to it. So today we are finally going to tackle the Nice runway 04, left or right, it doesn't really matter which, but we're going to fly the VOR into Nice. It's an interesting approach because it features a heavily offset approach. A lot of pilots fly this quite regularly. It's a busy airport, Nice, and it's an unusual one for having such high amounts of traffic whilst also not having a straight-in approach. Most big airports just have RLSs these days, or straight-in RNAV approaches or something like that. But Nice has resisted this. It's actually due to this this area beneath us now. You can actually see is going to be the problem. What we don't want to do is fly over it directly like we're doing right now. In nice weather, they will expect you to instead fly through this bay over the water and then go in and land at Nice Airport over there, or similar on the other end of 22, but that's more restricted by terrain. There's no terrain restriction in Nice that stops you flying straight in approach. It's just not what they prefer, and they do not allow it, and they will charge you if you try, unless the weather means that they are offering that approach. So the standard in Nice is to fly the approach, make a relatively late turn in this bay, and then line up at the runway. You turn us around below 1500 feet, you turn onto final, so it's relatively late in modern aviation terms. Good fun though, a nice place to fly into. I enjoy it a lot. So today we're going to be showing you how you can do that right from beginners level. So even if you don't know how to fly a VOR approach, it will all be covered in this video. It does start off with the VOR initially, and then it moves on to more of a visual sort of aspect. So let's get started in the video. I'll be using the Phoenix Simulations A320 for this one, but this will work in the fly-by-wire A32NX, in the toeless Airbus aircraft, in X Plane, in Microsoft Flight Simulator. This is a relatively generic sort of video. I'm just using the Phoenix today. As ever, I am a real-world Airbus pilot, but none of this is for any real-world use. It's just to give you some extra context on your home simulations. So do please enjoy. So those of you who've seen my challenging approach videos before will know what's coming. We have to talk about it first, of course. So I'm going to run through what the approach involves and how we're going to fly it, and then we'll go and actually fly it. So do please bear with me. If you don't have the charts, then you can follow through with my instructions on here, but I'll be using the Navigraph charts for this. So first of all, we are flying into Nice, of course. Now, the start or the arrival isn't too important, but I'm pretending we've just flown in for whatever arrival has led us to the must hold. It doesn't really matter, and you'll see why shortly. That Nice arrivals all sort of drop you off at various points, a lot of them over in Mas, or if you're coming from the northeast, you could end up out here or in Neras. It's not going to be an issue for the approach, because what we're then going to do is fly, and this will be specifically the VOR Alpha for 04 left is what we're going to fly today. There is also an RNP which has got a similar sort of idea, but we're flying the VOR. We're going to do this super old-fashioned, and I'll talk about why that is. To fly into Nice these days, a lot of airlines will have not only their own procedures, but also probably or various levels of coding in the FMGCs and so on. The Airbus these days, it's very possible to have it fly all of this approach on its own, right down to the threshold, as long as it's coded correctly. So airlines have the option to do that. So that would be a modern way of doing it. That means that the automation can handle everything and line up with the runway, and it reduces workload and it increases capacity for other things. But that's not necessarily the case today. You can see that there's RNP Alpha here, and it has minima of 2,000 feet, which is actually no benefit over the VOR Alpha, which is also a minima of 2,000 feet, which means we have to see the runway by the time we reach 2,000 feet in our descent. There are straight-in approaches, as we discussed, onto 04 left, but we will not be flying those. Those are not usually available unless the weather dictates it. They want us to fly in over the bay to avoid flying over the houses here to reduce noise. So that is why there is also an RMP straight-in as well. Again, not allowed to do this normally. So we're going to be flying the VOR. As a result, we're going to fly this VOR not using final app. This is going to be a selected approach, as we call it on the Airbus. Now, I have tutorials on selected approaches and VOR approaches on the channel in track FPA mode, it's called, but that will be not necessary for today. I'm going to talk you through it. What we're going to do is, instead of using final app, because if we do, final app will only get us to this point and then it will disconnect, or it won't be much good. It will revert anyway. So we're going to control this approach by flying it fully selected as we come down here and then make our turn onto final. Now, is that realistic to what people would do? It would really depend, but I want to give you the satisfaction of flying this approach as it's originally designed. A VOR tracking, turning, that's how it was set up. And yeah, it's going to be relatively slow. But then again, and what I mean by slow is we'll have to configure relatively early. But having said that, it's only a few miles earlier than you would normally, because you can see here we're not actually that far from the runway as we fly this approach, and that is not unrealistic for Nice. You can't fly this approach as sportily as you would just straight in ILS, because you have to deal with a few extra things. Good, so that's the plan. We are over here at Mus, somewhere out here, and we're going to fly from this arrival from Bisbo. So you can actually see from the start that Mus is just sitting over here off to the south. So we're going to head out and then in and then onto the approach. Great. So we're going to fly this approach with the nice weather today, which is when this would normally be used. But if the cloud base was low, say 2,300 feet, we could be completely in cloud right now. You would still be expected to fly this down to the minima. So what are we going to actually do? Well, it's quite straightforward. We're going to head to Bisbo, and then we're going to continue to 8.1 CGS. At that point, we'll be at 3,000 feet. After we pass the 8.1, as we pass, we're going to start our descent. We'll be doing this stabilized, which means, and I'm going to talk you through it as we go, but as we run towards 8.1 DME, we need to slow down. By the way, the CGS is the VOR in front of us. It's not at the airport, which is a different one, the AZR. We are flying towards the CGS straight ahead. So you're going to head towards it. We're going to slow down. We're going to go flap 2, and then about 3 miles before, 8, 9, 10, so about 11.1, we'll go gear down. 2 miles before, we'll go flap 3, and then at 1 mile before, I'm going to pre-select, or I'm going to put the aircraft into track FPA mode by pressing this button. Remember, this now allows the aircraft to fly in a track, so it will track straight ahead, and flight path angle, so we can choose the angle of descent we want. So I'm going to pre-arm 3 degrees down. Then we're going to, at half a mile, we're going to drop flap full, and the aircraft will balloon slightly. And then at 0.3 miles, which will be a 0.4 DME, because it's counting down, we're going to pull 3 degrees. Now, if this all sounds complicated, don't panic. I will talk you through it as we go, and you'll see me do these actions. But this is just for those who already know what I'm talking about with this. So that's the plan. It's a classic stabilized approach. The reason is we want to fly down this in FPA. We could use final app, but it would run out of information here, and you'd swap over. So why not just do this? It's only 3 miles different anyway. So that's what we're going to do to keep it nice and straightforward. Down we go at 3 degrees from 8.1. Now you'll see that this has a level off here to the missed approach point at 5 miles. But we're not going to do that. It's not really what I want to do. We're going to go down to 2,000 feet. And then if we're not visual, we're going to go around. And it's that straightforward, really. 5 miles, 2,000 feet will pretty much be the same anyway. This is a slightly misleading picture. We don't do this. We don't level off anymore at MDA until we can see the runway. We used to, but that's not a thing anymore unless you're circling, but that's a whole other topic. So we'll be coming down here, gear down, flap full, fully configured, and we'll have pulled 3 degrees on the flight path angle over here. We'll be telling the aircraft to fly 3 degrees down, which it will. And then if we can't see the runway, we'll go around at 2,000 feet and we'll follow this, which is in the coding. We'll go right out 136 away from the VOR out to sea, out to 28 miles from the AZR, and then make an arc round to join it near us. Now, hopefully we'll see the runway. We know we will today. So what in that case we'll do is we'll continue, carry on at 3 degrees, no problem at all. Carry on until we get to around about 1,400 feet, maybe 1,300 feet for the 04 left. It's a visual sort of thing. And then we'll start a nice right turn to line up with the runway. The whole time, and this is the trick to this approach, carry on at 3 degrees for this runway. It's different on the other end, but for this runway, you carry on at 3 degrees, and then you'll turn onto final, visually looking outside. So it's often easier actually for the co-pilot to fly this approach because it's on their side of the flight deck, but there we go. So let's load it up into the FMGC. So we're in the hold, and I have no arrival in here yet, so let me go to plan mode on the EFIS control. Zoom in a bit and we'll select the arrival. VOR Alpha 04 left is our plan for today. At the start we've already flown, so we can forget about that. Approach via, where are we going to come in via? Well, we're starting from Mus, so I can actually put Mus in, which is where we are. Then obviously Neras and so on are the other holds. If we zoom out on the here, I believe it would just show us a vector. Yeah, so this is the transition from Mus. I don't know actually where they put that chart in here. There you go. So that is the transition. Just head out to sea. That's what you'll be expected to do once if you're cleared to carry on after Mus. You'll just head out to sea, and then from out at sea you'll be sent towards Bisbo at some point, which is the initial fix of this approach. Hello, the co-pilot has come to help. So I'm going to insert that. Great. So there it is. There's the vector, and then there is our approach, and that's all we get. That little straight line. It's not much use, that nav line. Crucially though, let me put it back into heading vertical speed. There we go. Crucially, it does have the go around in it. So if we were to look through the coding and zoom in and scroll along, there it is. So if we were to go around, we could follow that. Now there's something quite interesting about the go arounds in Nice. If we go around from this approach point, we'll fly right turn 136 out to AZR and then out to Neras. However, if we go around after this point, once we've started this part of the approach, remember we're going to carry on from 5 miles, carry on descending at 3 degrees, about 1,400 feet, make our right turn, 3 degrees, intercept the Pappies. The Pappy is required for this approach. If we go around from this point, we cannot make that right turn anymore. The reason is there's a lot of traffic in this bay, different aircraft, helicopters coming in and out and all sorts. So what you can't do is just suddenly from here carve a line across out to Neras. It would upset air traffic control and some other aircraft. So what we end up doing is going around, fly towards the runway, and then go out past it 5 miles on the other side or 5 miles away from CGS, and then make our right turn. That is the requirement, and you've got to hit a visual bulk landing. So straight ahead, passing the hospital, 5 miles CGS, right turn, 110 degrees. I mean, good luck for spotting the hospital if you don't know the area, but there you go. So 5 miles CGS, what you're going to do. So that's hopefully not what we'll do today, but that is what that's there for. So remember to do little sort of hat on the FMGC to set it up. So we've done flight plan, RadNav. Now it's got CGS tuned, but I really want that to be tuned. So I'm going to put in CGS there, 109.2. Let me check that's correct. 109.2 and an inbound course of 354. So I can put in 354. Now why am I doing this? Well, I'm probably going to fly the approach. I'm not too worried about tracking the VOR because it's such a short part of the approach. And we'll initially let the aircraft line up in nav. And this is where this is a bit of a hybrid, this approach. There's lots of different things going on here. I'm going to let the aircraft line up in nav mode, and then once it's in line, I'm going to swap over to track and pull track. Because if I leave it in final lap, it's going to all drop out on us. So we're going to take control earlier. So I'm going to let it line up. I'm going to start down at FPA 3 degrees, and at some point I'll pull track before they go around, or the missed approach point, because we don't want to fly over there. So I can pull track and let it carry on to the CGS and then make our right turn. I just want to stress again, this is just one way of doing this. Airlines will have all different rules. Pilots will have different preferences. If you fly into Nice in the real world, I apologise. I'm sure what I'm saying is probably not matching what you would do, but that's because there's just loads of different ways of doing this approach. There we go. Right. So I'm going to select VOR1 to display because we do have to display it. This is a VOR approach. We cannot get away with ignoring it altogether. So CGS 109.2, course 354. 109.2, 354. Good. And now, should everything go wrong and we lose our map or we lose GPS or something, I can just pull up the VOR, the course is set to 354, and I could continue to track it like that. Worst case. Great. Progress page, well, it's not too useful, but I'm going to put in the 04 left threshold in here just as a backup check. Performance page. I happen to know that I've set the weather to be quite pleasant here, so I'm going to put in 1013 with a temperature of 15 degrees. That is pretty much standard atmosphere, 270 at 3. Bit of a tailwind. They will use a tailwind. 04 is preferable to the other runway. Minimum of 2,000 feet, which we get from our chart here, 2,000. Yeah, they prefer this runway even with a bit of a tailwind because it's a bit of a more straightforward approach. Next, go in altitude if we need it. Remember, we're going out to Neras, and we agreed that we would climb to an altitude of 3,000 feet in all those cases, so put 3,000. Medium water brake I'm going to go for. Fuel prediction. Oh, that's because I loaded up the sim. I didn't put the weights in. 55 or 56 tons, 29.8. It's a bit embarrassing. This is not a tutorial on how to fly the Airbus. This is just a tutorial for this approach. But there we go. Right, 4.6 tons of fuel. We've got lots of fuel. It doesn't think we have an auto. We don't actually have 3.6 extra. But anyway, 4.6 is more than enough fuel for what we're trying to do. Right, so let's leave the hold and begin the approach. I'm going to use flight plan, exit. And now we're going to head out from Muss, out to sea, as if we're being vectored by air traffic control. I'll put the terrain on, but I'm just going to reduce the brightness of the back half so that terrain dims out a bit, because there's going to be quite a lot on the screen shortly, and we'll keep the nav high but the terrain a bit lower. There we go. So air traffic control will clear you out from MUS. Usually you don't have to hold going into Nice. What they'll do is they'll send you out to sea and separate aircraft like that, and then once things are spaced out enough, they can send you to Bisbo to begin your approach. So let's bring up the right chart. Good. Now, as with all of these challenging approaches, workload is going to become our biggest issue. How do we manage the workload so we aren't trying to do two things at once and then miss something or get it wrong or rush it? So, you know, great idea here is to run the approach checklist if you can. So get rid of that out of the way. So ECAM status is checked. Approach type and runway, we're going for the VOR alpha onto 04 left at Nice. Minima 2000 is set. Let me just check. It's in the climb phase. That's because of the way I've got the box set up wrong, but no issue, yours won't. So that's a minimum 2000. Approach phase, we need to activate it. So let's do that now. I'll put it in the right phase. It says tune AZR10965, but the problem is we're not using that, so I'm not going to do that. It can also manually tune that on the right if it likes, because I haven't force tuned both sides. Good. And next is barrier F. Well, we're still on a flight level. But yeah, somewhere around here you'd expect to get descent down to sort of 6,000 feet. So, or even 5,000. We're out over the water now. It's safe to descend. So let's go down and set QNH, which is of course 1013. So barrier F is QNH 1013. That's the approach checklist complete. Next is the landing checklist. Right. So another way to build in space is to control the energy of the aircraft. We're coming in at 220 knots. We're clean, and we are going to descend to 5,000 feet, which we're going to level off around out here. Now, this is actually, if we got sent direct to Bisbo, this is 15 miles away. We need to get down to 3,000 feet by then. So that's about 4,000 feet, three and a bit thousand feet. So, sorry, no, 4,000 feet to lose. So we need to have 12 miles, and then we would arrive there clean, but we need to be 190 knots. So we're actually a bit high on energy if we were to get cleared direct Bisbo, and that's quite a likely situation from here, frankly. So time to start fixing that. Let's put in direct Bisbo as if that's what we're cleared to do. And we need to be 190 knots when we get there. But you can see here, yeah, things are improving now. We've only got 1,500 feet to lose, actually. That was a bit of an incorrect prediction by the aircraft. So we're going to have time to level off and then slow down as well. Let's put in 3,000 feet. There we go. That's going to level off before Bisbo. So what we'll do is get there, level off and slow down. You don't want to be too slick with this. There's no point trying to be absolutely perfect with a continuous descent. We do our best, but it's if you're practicing this, or we're going to do a stabilized approach, there's no point rushing in. So remember, the plan from here then is we're going to head to Bisbo, then to the FD04 Alpha, which is where we begin our descent. So it's after Bisbo, which we're going to pass Bisbo flap 1 as a maximum speed of 190 knots. So probably about flap 1, 180 knots. Put out flap 2, then about 3 miles to go, gear down, flap 3, and then 1 mile to go, I'll pre-arm 3 degrees down, half a mile flap full, and 0.3 miles we'll pull the FPA. I'll talk through all of that as we do it. I'll leave the chart up here so we can see where we are. Hopefully it will appear for you. There we go, so heading to Bisbo, good. Let's put that over here, and then maybe that's going to help out. Great. I'm going to manage the speed now, start reducing the energy in the aircraft, and that will also, by managing the speed, the aircraft will come back to green dot where it's more efficient, so we'll actually level off a little bit later, which will be absolutely fine. Another thing we can do, because I can still see a bit of a level segment coming, so I know I've got a bit of room to play with, but I want to keep that segment level. I don't want to be descending there if I can avoid it. But we could at this point go flap 1, so the speed is all good. We'll go to flap 1. And now the aircraft continues slow. I might get rid of the chart, actually, it's a bit distracting. But there we go. 1,000 feet to go now till we level off at 3,000. Crucial for flying non-precision approaches is that once we get the radio altimeter, we must have the correct QNH, by the way, at all times. But when we get the radio altimeter come to life, that is when I need to definitely know, or definitely check, that it matches. I'll be over the water, so I'm expecting 2,500 feet on the readout. when it comes alive to match 2,500 feet on the altimeter. Those two should match. We're over the water. If they aren't, we've set the QNH wrong and we are potentially at a wrong altitude. As you can see, beautiful weather today. But remember, this will all be IMC. You can have all of this grayed out. But yeah, we're going to fly in, around the bay and in. Now you can do a visual approach, of course. I'm showing you a technique here to give you sort of a by numbers way of doing this. But you could fly visually if you chose to. Pretty difficult to fly visually onto the 2-2 end, I would say, although some people would disagree with that. But I think it's a bit of a strange visual picture, especially if you're not used to it, as ever with flying, really. There's speed out star. That's all good. We're below 190 knots. We're going to turn from Bispo. All looking good. So by this point, you'd want to be cleared for the approach from air traffic control so that you know you can carry on and begin your descent in towards the runway. Okay, so starting the turn now. I've got my VOR CGS. It is identified, 11.3 miles away, about sensible. And we got our needle over here. Remember, we are still required to track, effectively, VOR. I'm letting nav do it, and nav line the aircraft up. But there we go, 354 inbound towards the CGS. Let's go to flaps 2. Slow the aircraft down. And remember, about 3 miles, so we're already 2 miles, so let's drop the gear. It's amazing how quickly things can run away. Arm the speed brakes, get the nose lights on. Good. And I'm going to, now I'm going to put track FPA. So now we're seeing the track FPA in the bird, which is all going to be handy in a moment. At 1 mile to go, so that's going to be 1 mile. You can just see it here, 1.2 is counting down, or you can use the 1 mile of adding 1 onto the 8.1. There we go. I'm going to put in -3. I'm going to go to flap 3 as well, which we should have done already, really. Put in -3 degrees, ready to go. At half a mile to go, there it is, flaps full. And now the aircraft will balloon slightly, and then at 0.3 miles, we just pull the 3 degrees. So you pull it slightly early, it's 0.3 miles to go, so at 8.4 down on the CGS. But there we go, and now we start down. The reason you put it slightly early is so that as the aircraft balloons, as flap full comes out, it will actually counteract that by starting slightly earlier. Now we check our altitudes on the way down. So at 7 miles, I should be 2640 feet. Go around altitude is in already of 3,000 feet, so we'll leave that alone. We're now fully configured, gear down, flap full, so that's good news. So 7 miles, 2640. We do have a VDEV scale for this part of the approach. Like I say, you could fly this in final lap, but it's not going to be useful in a moment, as we otherwise it would just fly the missed approach, so we don't want to do that. So there we go, we've gone through it, sorry, 2640. Red altimeter, so 2,500 feet on here. The radio altimeter matches our altimeter, so that's perfect, we're in the right place. 6 miles, 2320. Remember, we're going to carry on as long as we're visual at 2,000 feet. So 6 miles, 2340. We are perhaps, 2320. No, we're on profile, I'd say. I don't want to fiddle with it for the sake of it, but there we go. Remember to correct it. If you were 10 feet high, you would move this to 3.1 degrees down for 1 mile. And then once you've done the mile, you put it back to 3 degrees. If you're 20 feet high, it would be 3.2 degrees for 1 mile. Likewise, if you were low, you'd do 2.8 degrees. 100 above. Right, 100 above. Are we visual? Yes, we are. So we can carry on. So that's good. So I'm going to leave it in FPA, and then that's the mistake you don't want to make. So don't do that. Make sure you pull the track earlier. There you go. So we want to be tracking 354. Now that's not going to make a huge difference. You can see we are still tracking roughly 354. There's the VOR in front of us. If I put it to VOR, you can actually see we've gone slightly right now. So I do 352 for a little bit. That's exactly why you need to have these things prepared in advance properly. But there we go. No great shakes. We are visual. We're carrying on. But otherwise, as you saw, it would have just flown around the missed approach, not what we want to do. So now I'm going to have to do the tricky part, which is fly the final approach. I say tricky. It's the flying part. So we need to stay on profile, so keep 3 degrees final approach. So I'm going to disconnect the autopilot, turn off the flight directors. Oh, like that. 1,400 feet. It's about time to start our gentle right turn. So I'm going to put the aircraft into a right bank, but it's not too sharp at the moment. You're going to judge this visually. Judge where the wind is coming from as well. So the wind is coming from our left. It's slightly blowing us to the right, so a gentler turn. If it was blowing us towards this terrain, then we would need to do a slightly steeper turn. Crucially, don't get distracted from or make sure you keep an eye on the vertical speed. 700 feet per minute is about right for 3 degrees. I can now put in the runway track if I wanted to. You'd get the other pilots to do this. We're actually blowing through here slightly, so let's steepen up that turn. 25 degrees would be sort of the maximum in this case. 040 degrees inbound track, not too important. That's something you'd get the other pilot to do, and then you can roll out. And there we go. We are lined up with the runway. Slight drift from the left, which is absolutely fine, and sticking with that 3 degrees. So you have picked up a bit of a descent there, so don't want to do that. 2 whites, 2 reds on the pappies. That's worked. Like I say, it's all about continuing that descent. And now you'd run the landing checklist, so that would be up to the other pilot. By the way, look how I am trying to put the nose, I'm trying to line up with the runway perfectly, but because the wind's slightly from the left, I'm getting blown to the right. You've got to fight your urge to put the runway where you're used to seeing, and that's true of pretty much all crosswind landings. Right, now, I'm going to, just getting 3 whites there, so let's get that rate of descent back on. Let's put that, that's a bit distracting having the tracking the wrong place. There we go. So, 1,000 feet per minute is not an unreasonable vertical speed if we're trying to correct. There we go, back to 2 whites, 2 reds, so we can put that back on 3 degrees. Go for medium water brake to deal with that wind. Normal landing then, about 30 feet, start the flare, idle the thrust levers at some point after that, and just hold it into the touchdown zone.
$100, 50, 40, 30,
flare,
20, retard,
idle, touchdown, bit of a bounce, and there we go. Spoilers, reverse green, decel. Interestingly, that caution there is caused by, we touched down, and it's harder in the sim to tell whether you bounce slightly or not. That's my excuse anyway. So by selecting reverses and holding them there, the aircraft has generated that warning for me saying, hey, you've got your reverses out, or you're trying to put reverses out and you're still in the air. That's realistic. That's what the real aircraft would do, just setting the parking brake. But yeah, in the real aircraft, it's easier to judge if you are on the ground or not, because you get obviously the feedback of the weight of the aircraft, and then the motion you can tell. Not always, but it is simpler. So there we go. Interesting approach. I think it's interesting that we saw that what would happen if we forgot to put it into track mode there, getting distracted by so many other things going on. And as I said, it's all about workload, and that approach would have been slightly smoother if I just slowed down the aircraft slightly earlier. Maybe if we'd done flap 2 at that initial point. Now, with 2 pilots, these things are easier to handle, of course, because you've got more capacity on the flight deck. But there you go. I think it's interesting to leave it in the video anyway, so we can see what happens. But yeah, we spotted the error. We got to the final stage. We saw the error and we fixed it. Not ideal, because it's better to see it earlier, but still, and not have it at all. But yeah, there you go. So we just pull the track, sensible sort of correction, and then carry on. So that's all for today's video. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. It's a bit of an interesting approach, and I enjoy it. And even there we saw how it can go a bit pear-shaped if you're not on top of things. Like I say, quite interesting just to see. Not unreasonable just to correct it, small corrections. But if you're not sure, or you're getting unraveled, or the workload has reached major spikes and you think you're missing too many things, it's time to go around, isn't it, and go and try again. But for that one, we knew what happened, so we could just correct ourselves back onto it. It's also an interesting thing that the approach is, like I say, not flown like this very much these days. You could just fly it entirely visually, and you could argue that visually you'd avoid some of the workload spikes. However, you need to know what you're doing. You need to judge the distances correctly, because you don't have the option to line up with the runway in advance. So you have to do that turn onto final quite late. So if you're flying visually and you get that wrong, you don't really have a lot of options. Whereas here we have a very controlled first part of the approach, with the visual segment later on. That's all for today's video then. There'll be more videos, guides, live streams coming on the channel soon in the Airbus and other aircraft, so do please subscribe if you'd like to see more of those. Otherwise, we'll see you again in another of those videos soon. Bye bye.